It was a typical evening at Power Pulse Gym, a sprawling fitness center in the heart of the city where sweat and ambition collided. The gym was a melting pot of people, bodybuilders, cardio enthusiasts, and martial artists, all chasing their own versions of strength. Among them was Marcus Reed, a 28-year-old black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, known for his flashy techniques and even flashier attitude. Marcus had been training at Power Pulse for years, building a reputation as a guy who never backed down from a challenge. His confidence bordered on arrogance, and he wore his black belt like a crown, always ready to remind everyone of his skill. On the other side of the gym, mopping the floors and wiping down equipment, was James Carter, a 45-year-old janitor who'd been working at Power Pulse for just over a year. James was a quiet man, his presence almost invisible to the gym's regulars. He moved methodically, his lean frame hidden under a loose-fitting uniform, his eyes always focused on his tasks. To most, he was just a guy who kept the place clean, someone who faded into the background of their workouts. But James carried himself with a certain calm, a steadiness that went unnoticed by those too busy chasing their own goals. Marcus, fresh off a sparring session where he'd tapped out 3 opponents in a row, was in high spirits that evening. He was surrounded by a small group of admirers, newer students who hung on his every word, laughing at his jokes and mimicking his swagger. As Marcus recounted his latest victory, his eyes landed on James, who was quietly sweeping near the edge of the mat. James was wiping down a bench, his movements deliberate, almost meditative. Something about the janitor's quiet demeanor irked Marcus, who was used to being the center of attention. "Hey, man," Marcus called out, his voice loud enough to turn heads. "You ever think about stepping on the mat? Or are you just here to clean up after us?" His tone was teasing, but there was an edge to it, a challenge wrapped in a smirk. The group around him chuckled, feeding off his energy. James didn't look up, just kept sweeping, his face unreadable. "Come on, don't be shy," Marcus pressed, walking closer to James. "You look like you got some moves under that janitor outfit. What do you say? Want to spar for fun?" The word fun dripped with condescension, and the laughter from Marcus's group grew louder. A few other gym members glanced over, curious about the commotion. The air in the gym shifted, a mix of amusement and discomfort settling over the crowd. James finally paused, resting his hands on the broom handle. He looked at Marcus, his expression calm but piercing, like he was seeing right through the younger man's bravado. "I'm just here to do my job," James said, his voice low and steady. There was no anger, no defensiveness, just a matter-of-fact tone that seemed to throw Marcus off balance. "Your job." Marcus laughed, turning to his audience for approval. "Man, you're in a gym. You're surrounded by fighters. You telling me you've never wanted to throw down? Or you just scared?" The word, scared, hung in the air, and the gym grew quieter. People were watching now, some with raised eyebrows, others with frowns. Marcus was pushing, and everyone could feel it. James set the broom against the wall, wiping his hands on his pants. He didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there, his posture relaxed but alert. "I don't fight for fun," he said finally, his voice carrying a weight that made a few people shift uncomfortably. "But if you want to spar, I'll spar." Marcus's grin widened, like he'd just won a bet with himself. "Oh, this is going to be good," he said, clapping his hands together. "All right, janitor man, let's see what you got. No hard feelings, right? Just a friendly match." He gestured to Matt, already imagining how he'd school this older man in front of everyone. The crowd was growing now, gym members drifting over, drawn by the unexpected challenge. Some whispered each other, wondering who this janitor was, and why he'd agreed to step into Marcus's world. The gym's head coach, a grizzled veteran named Coach Daniels, caught wind of what was happening and walked over, his arms crossed. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone sharp. He'd seen Marcus pull stunts like this before, using his skills to show off rather than teach. Daniels didn't like it, but he also knew Marcus was one of his best students, a competitor who brought attention to the gym. "James here says he wants to spar," Marcus said, his voice full of mock innocence. "I'm just giving the man what he wants." Daniels looked at James, his eyes narrowing. "You sure about this, James?" he asked. There was something in his tone, a hint of concern, but also curiosity, like he knew something the others didn't. James nodded, his face still unreadable. "I'm sure," he said simply. Daniel sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right then. Keep it clean, both of you. No ego trips, Marcus." He shot Marcus a look that said he meant it, then stepped back to let them prepare. The mat was cleared, and the gym's atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Marcus was already stretching, bouncing on his toes, his black belt tied tightly around his waist. He was in his element, ready to put on a show. James, on the other hand, didn't change out his work clothes. He just took off his shoes, stepped onto the mat, and stood there, waiting. His lack of fanfare only made Marcus more eager to dominate. As the two faced off, the crowd formed a loose circle around the mat. Some were rooting for Marcus, expecting him to make quick work of the janitor. Others were just curious, wondering what James was thinking, stepping into a sparring match with no visible training. A few, though, noticed the way James stood, his feet planted, his shoulders relaxed, his eyes locked on Marcus like he was reading every move before it happened. Coach Daniels called for the match to start, and Marcus didn't waste time. He shot forward, aiming to take James down with a quick double-leg takedown, a move he'd used countless times to overpower opponents. But James moved just a slight shift of his weight, and Marcus's hands grasped at air. The crowd murmured, surprised. Marcus, undeterred, reset and came in again, this time throwing a series of feints to confuse James before going for a single-leg takedown. Again, James sidestepped, his movements so subtle they almost looked accidental. Marcus was starting to get frustrated now. He wasn't used to opponents slipping out of his grasp so easily. "Come on, man. Stop running," he said, his voice tight. He lunged again, this time managing to grab James's arm, pulling him into a clinch. Marcus was stronger, younger, and trained, and he expected to overpower James easily. But as he tried to throw James to the mat, James twisted, using Marcus's momentum against him. In a flash, Marcus was on his back, James standing over him, unharmed. The gym went silent. Marcus scrambled to his feet, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Lucky move," he muttered, brushing himself off. He came at James harder now, his ego bruised, throwing flurry strikes, jabs, hooks, a spinning back kick. Each one missed, James weaving and dodging with precision that looked effortless. It wasn't flashy, not like Marcus's techniques, but it was effective. Every move James made was calculated, wasting no energy. The crowd was starting to shift. Whispers turned into gasps as James continued to evade Marcus's attacks. Then, in a moment that would be talked about for weeks, James caught Marcus's arm during a sloppy punch, twisted it behind his back, and swept his legs out from under him. Marcus hit the mat hard, and before he could recover, James had him in an armbar, the hold applied with such control that Marcus couldn't move without risking injury. "Tap," James said quietly, his voice steady but firm. Marcus hesitated, his pride warring with the pain in his arm. The gym was dead silent now, every eye on the mat. Finally, Marcus tapped, his hand slapping the mat twice. James released him immediately, standing up and stepping back, his expression as calm as it had been when he was sweeping the floor. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in a stunned buzz of conversation. Marcus got to his feet, rubbing his arm, his face a mix of shock and anger. He opened his mouth to say something, but Coach Daniels stepped in, his voice cutting through the noise. "That's enough," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Good match, both of you." Marcus stormed off the mat, muttering under his breath, while James simply walked back to his broom, picking it up like nothing had happened. But the gym was different now. People were looking at James differently, whispering to each other, trying to piece together what they'd just seen. Who was this guy? How had a janitor just dismantled a black belt like that? Over the next few days, the story spread like wildfire. Gym members started asking questions, digging into James's background. It turned out James wasn't just a janitor. He'd been a martial artist for decades, training in multiple disciplines, jiu-jitsu, judo, and even some lesser-known styles from his time traveling abroad. He'd competed in his younger years, racking up wins in regional tournaments, but had stepped away from the spotlight after a personal tragedy. He'd taken the janitor job at Power Pulse to stay close to the world he loved, even if it meant working in the shadows. Marcus, meanwhile, was forced to confront his own arrogance. The loss stung, but it wasn't just about losing a sparring match. It was about realizing he'd underestimated someone based on appearances, assuming his black belt made him untouchable. He avoided James for a while, too embarrassed to face him. But eventually, he approached the older man one evening when the gym was quiet. "Hey, James," Marcus said, his voice softer than usual. "I was a jerk the other day. I didn't expect you to be that good." James looked at him, his eyes steady but not unkind. "It's not about being good," he said. "It's about respect. You don't know what someone's been through until you've walked in their shoes." Marcus nodded, the words sinking in. "Can you maybe show me that armbar you used? I've never seen it done like that." James smiled, just a small one, and nodded. "Sure, but you gotta clean the mats first." From that day on, things changed at Power Pulse. Marcus started training with more humility, listening more than he talked. James, though he never sought the spotlight, became a quiet mentor to those who approached him, sharing his knowledge with anyone willing to learn. The gym became a place where respect mattered more than rank, where a black belt and a broom carried equal weight. And the story of that sparring match, it became a legend at Power Pulse, a reminder that strength isn't always loud, and the quietest person in the room might just be the one to watch.